Hello and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, hi, you're very welcome. This is Reading the Past and I'm Dr. Cat, and as you may see I am joined by a lovely guest. This is Sarah Jane and we are going to talk about what history means to you, to me and to everybody else. So we're going to be talking about live historical interpretation today. Let's go. So, Sarah Jane, tell me, what first sparked your interest in history?
So for me, the love of history came quite late. I do remember being in middle school and having a history teacher for a time who was very engaging. So he'd build like forts and castles out of the desks and the chairs, and we'd put on fights. And for me, that really inspired something in me to get into history. But then when he left, it was sort of all very textbook again. It was going to books, and for me, it did nothing for my imagination. So history was lost to me again for a while. And it wasn't until I was about 18, a friend of mine was a reenactor, reenacting particularly the Second World War. And I went along with him to a couple of shows, and I don't know whether it was something to do with the nostalgia and people coming together for with this one interest and being so involved in something, this passion, that made me go, yeah, there's something about history here that I want to get into, and so it kind of came in peaks and troughs, but now I'm hooked, and it's all
But you are paid to be historical interpreter at various sites, so you work for a number of companies. Could you talk a little bit about the ethos of those companies, the sites they work in?
So there's a couple of companies I work for. One in particular do a lot for English heritage. So often it means going to a site and perhaps storytelling. Through the power of storytelling, you'll bring a character to life.
Can you explain power of storytelling?
Power of storytelling. Okay, so storytelling is especially, it's for all ages. You know, remember being a child and you're so enthralled and in love with a story you're listening to. But it doesn't change when you're an adult. So if you can gather a group of people and tell them a story, it could be any story, it could be a story of crime and punishment, anything, and you're in a castle, you're in that environment. There's something quite magical about that. And for me, that's what drew me to this job. Yeah, the power of stories and telling them to all ages, from a toddler to a 90-year-old. Yeah, that's never lost. It doesn't matter what age you are, as long as you can be engaging and you can bring history to life through your words, how you're dressed, through your character. I think it's something quite special about that. So yeah, so you've done some stuff. So you work at English heritage sites. So English heritage sites all across the country. And what sort of people are you reenacting? Real historical figures, or I suppose a sort of person who might be there? Like, what's the thing? With English heritage, generally, I've done a lot of, you're sort of generic person in history, so not really a specific person. Do a lot of medieval, so generally I'm quite sort of low class, not hugely low, but I'm not anyone of high status. And that way I think you don't put a boundary between yourself and the public. So there's something still quite relatable. You're not all high status, and I know you can't approach me unless you're doing it in a correct way. So generally it's no one specific, but I have done different sites where I am an actual character. Yeah, and you also do the Roman baths. And who do you play at the Roman baths? Roman baths, I generally play Apulia, so she's a slave. And you say that word and people go, oh God, that's what a job, but she is based on an actual person in history. So there's a lot of research goes into that. So that's one example of one place I work where I am that specific person. And that's brilliant. But being the Roman baths, it's a huge tourist site. So some people get it. Some people just want photos with you, and some people want the story. They want that backstory. They want to know who this woman was. And how we know about her as well. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think that probably a lot of people are going to look at you and think, well, obviously, she's going to play young Elizabeth I. Have you ever played young Elizabeth? I have. Longleat House, which I've worked at for quite a few years. I've done Elizabeth I there. And is it... So that's obviously a figure that we have a lot of documentary evidence about, and we also have a lot of fiction that's filled in the gaps.
So if you compare playing Elizabeth I with playing a generic person in history, somebody who we may just have a kind of birth record for, what's harder? That's a tough question.
What's harder?
I know that's a tough question to ask you.
It is interesting because you've got the whole low and high status. So suddenly, as soon as you dress up as Elizabeth I, you carry yourself differently, but people do approach you differently. Whether there's a fear, because it's such a striking image. And like you say, people have already got an idea of this queen, not necessarily a correct idea, but again, through watching films and through books. And so people, you do get some interesting questions, but people suddenly do treat you completely differently. But if I came out as a peasant, then, they have a bit more fun with you.
Right.
It's interesting what the power of costume can do.
Yes. I suppose one thing that we expect, because we live in it and we know the world, we sort of think, well, if I'm dressed like this, you must know who I am.
Yes.
And I suppose also, though, the kind of the television side of it doesn't help, because costumes, there are some where they're great and they are completely to the period, and there are some where it's like, okay, so you've basically done a Versace catwalk as part of a historical TV show. And I get very angry when I see elastic, when I see hair elastic, or when I see a zip, or when I see women who are supposed to be queens walking about court with their hair completely uncovered.
Yeah.
And I mean, those are the sorts of things that I think that as a pedant annoy me, but probably nobody in the general public is going to care. And why should they, frankly? But what it does do is that when they encounter somebody dressed as Elizabeth I, they think that she's Queen Victoria.
Yes.
Or a prostitute.
Oh, yeah, well, yeah, I've had that.
Amazing. Yes. So what's your favourite? Is it playing somebody who's very well known or playing somebody who's less well known?
So for the past couple of Christmases, I've had a job where I've one day played a maid, a household servant. Mm-hmm. You're looking more sort of Edwardian period, so in a stately home. But the next day I might be playing the lady of the house. So I love the differences between the characters. Because I quite enjoy being high status, because there's something in me, I enjoy carrying myself differently. My stance is different, the way I talk is different, the way I approach people is different. I enjoy that challenge. But then the maid, there's something more humble about it, and you're more approachable. So they're so different, but I think, so household maid I enjoy. Especially with things like Rise of Downton Abbey. Everyone wants to know about that side. They don't want to know about, the aristocracy and what they got up to. They want to know about the real people that they can relate to from the past.
And actually, that's a very interesting point, because while Downton Abbey is wildly popular, it does. There's a lot of sort of talk, and there's been some interesting documentaries about how it glamorises that kind of life below stairs attitude. And I wonder, sort of thinking politically, if we think about historical interpretation in these sites where we're all in lovely costumes, but we're all very healthy.
Yes.
And we've all got our own teeth. And we're not by any means saying that to be realistic, you need to pull a tooth or have one blackened out. I mean, let's not go that far. But I do wonder about the kind of politics of interpretation. And when you're one day playing the maid and then the next day playing the lady of the house, the questions that people are asking you, are they asking you like, so when did you get into service? Or how did you get into service? And it's those backstories of some of these girls who may have been orphaned and been Bernardo's girls. And they're in this house because they behaved impeccably in the Bernardo's home. And then the next question needs to be, well, what happens to the girls who didn't behave so impeccably? Where are they? And I think when sometimes we walk into these beautiful houses or palaces or even ruins, and we meet people who are elaborately costumed, who are incredibly well researched. Nobody wants to be meeting with a plague victim. Nobody wants to be seeing that nitty-gritty side of life. I don't think it's appropriate for us to play act at it. So I don't think that historical interpreters should be doing it. But I wonder, are we actually sometimes putting a bit of a gloss over the ugly bits of history? And is that okay? I don't know.
It's an argument. It's like, are we doing this for entertainment?
And whose entertainment?
And whose entertainment?
Yes.
Or are we doing this? Of course, it's education. You must educate. This is what this is about. But there's that fine line. Entertainment brings people in.
Yeah.
And the word education can sometimes be a bit scary for some people. If they know they're going to go and they're going to get a lecture on something, and perhaps that's not what they want to be seeing. But you're right, we do gloss over things, and we do make things look visually interesting and beautiful. And whether it's because, I don't know, do we not want to face the reality of...
Yeah. Well, I mean, I suppose on one hand, nobody's going to approach somebody in costume who's like weeping with like suppurating sores on them. Nobody's going to approach that person. So you're just, at that point, you're not doing interpretation, you're doing method acting in a historical site.
Yes.
For nobody's benefit really but your own. So but I think it's one of those things with all things, whether it's kind of the literature we teach or the way we talk about art, like we need to constantly be engaging with our own politics, I think, and thinking about whose narratives we're presenting, whose stories we're presenting, and constantly assessing whether that's truthful, valuable, historically accurate, but also what it can potentially mean for driving the way in which people understand the world. For me, I suppose history teaches us about how we live now. And if we gloss over the more unpleasant, I suppose, treatment of people, the kind of colonial, the treatment of women, if we don't talk about that because it's unsavoury, then we don't really learn where we've come from and how much further we've got to go. Which, I'm sorry, I've just rambled there for a bit.
No, you rambled.
But it does bring me to maybe the last question. It's on my list, but there were only supposed to be 3 questions, and I've asked you about 85, so thank you for humouring me. But the last question I have for you is, why do you think that live interpretation is useful, if you do, and what do you think it offers to the public and also to the heritage industry?
I think, going back to the fact that as people, we are in a society where everything is right now. So you could go on your phone and you could watch any Netflix series. You know, we're very visual. You have to see it. You know, it has to come to life. So if you go to a historical site and then you suddenly see these people in costume, whether you want to go and approach them or not, or engage with them, there is something about that image that people like to see. So it's entertaining, like I said. There's something entertaining about it. But equally, we can learn so much, and you're putting these images, these people, in this setting, and there's something about it that appeals, I think, to most people. In terms of heritage, I mean, it's great for tourism. A lot of, of course, people come and visit this country, and it's quite quirky, I think. You know, I know other places do it, of course, but there's something quite special. We need to cherish this heritage.
But I do think the thing you said earlier about sneaking the learning in through entertainment is sort of like putting the peas in the mashed potato.
Like, I mean, I don't do that. Do you have to put peas in the mashed potato?
I mean, I might have to hide peas from myself to get me to eat them. I might be that person. But yeah, so I think there is that kind of element of like, you're there and you're kind of in these beautiful costumes and you're happy to just stand and take photos. You know, that's part of the job. But there is also that you have this knowledge, and if somebody comes up to you and you're like, oh, you're interested, you're like, you will find out so much from these people. And I do think it adds a lot of value to the heritage site. And I think also there's an element to which it's a kind of living history that keeps the site alive in some ways. That when you walk through a French chateau, and they can be absolutely beautiful, but there is an element to which they don't have this kind of living, engaging history. It's like walk around the building, go to the gift shop, off you go.
Doesn't put anything in perspective. That's the thing.
Yeah, and actually the fact that many of these buildings have a span of history. So you might be in a building that is Norman or Tudor or wherever, but you might have a Roman on the site, because actually doing that can teach people that actually this site was in use for 2,000 years. And that can be useful. The fact that a historical interpreter can be there playing something out that stretches far, far back into the past, even without the kind of, you've just maybe got the footprint of that building there. But this person can be there saying, when I was here, this is what I could see. I think that works out quite nicely. Also, you do have, as you said, a phenomenal collection of costumes. So I'm hoping that by the miracle of editing, I will have access to some of your wonderful pictures, because you play people, like, as you said, so you've got the Roman slave girl in the baths, but she's also got pictures of herself right up to World War II as one of the munitions workers. And there's all the suffrage stuff and all that. So you're going to send me some of those pictures.
I will.
Also, you should follow Sarah Jane on her Instagram. I'm going to leave the link in the description box, because she posts loads of stuff about her adventures and her costumes and all of that kind of stuff. So keep an eye on that. And we are going to have our tea, and then we're going to go mudlarking.
We're excited, aren't we? We're going to play the foreshore and find treasure.
I'm very excited. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you all for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, let me know by leaving a like. Please subscribe to the channel. Please click the bell icon next to the subscribe button so you know when I've next uploaded. You can find me over on my social media. I'll be leaving the links in the description box down below. I hope you have a great day, whatever you're doing. Take care. Bye-bye for now.
Bye.